Thank you. I think what Nadia was trying to tell you is that I can hold a job. People have so many misconceptions about radicalization and deradicalization. It's really very difficult where to start. First of all, you have to start by not using those terms, because people mean different things and they confuse it all the time. Radicalization may mean acquiring extreme views, but radicalization also means doing things like making bombs and exploding them. The two of them are not identical, and you really have to separate the two. So I don't use radicalization anymore. I use the turn to political violence, because that's what it is. I mean, most people are concerned about the bomb making, not as much with what people call violent extremism. It turns out terrorists are not Muslim scholars. Terrorists are not Muslim scholars. And so I completely agree with the previous speakers, but that's not why they do what they do. I mean, as a matter of fact, most of them have a very limited background in Islam and kind of turned to Islam supposedly later on in their 20s, or now they're getting younger in their late teenage years. And it's precisely that lack of background in Islam that makes them vulnerable to extreme interpretation, because they don't have the context of it. But I think by trying to teach them, well, this is Islam, this is not Islam, I don't think you're going to get anywhere, because the young people, and those young people anywhere, are fairly arrogant, and they think they know better. They're not going to listen to you, unfortunately. All right, so how does this process of turning to political violence occur? This is based on my survey of all global neo-jihadi terrorism plots in the West in the last 20 years, starting with really the inception of Al-Qaeda in August of 1988. Those are not just Al-Qaeda plots. I call them neo-jihadi because jihad, it's not jihad. It definitely is not jihad. Jihad is a rule-governed activity. These kids don't play by the rules. And so you can't call it jihad, but if I don't call it jihad, people won't understand what I'm talking about. That's why I call it neo-jihadi. And I apologize for this kind of academic, wavering. But so what do we have? This is really, we have to understand that the turn to violence emerges out of a specific context. And that's what people forget. And the context is what I call a protest counterculture. And the whole process is really a two-step process. One is an involvement in this process, in this protest counterculture, and the second one is a turn to violence, which is a rejection, in a sense, of this protest counterculture. So the guys who turn to violence reject society twice. Once to join the protest counterculture, and then they reject that as not being far enough. What is this protest counterculture? It's a utopian counterculture, and it arises from what I call the interstices of society, meaning between two things. And it's not just Islam. We talk about the anarchists about 100 years ago that were between rural to urban migration. In the 60s, the leftists were between their family and then the migration to the universities. People don't realize after World War II the explosion of education that happened in the West. And the interstices of society, and they reject both traditions. So if you're going to start using tradition, you have to start pretty young. Otherwise, if they get to a certain level, it's a little bit too late at that point. Again, arrogance of youth. This is a loose, amorphous collection of people. It's vague. in terms of, who is in and who is out within this counterculture. It's diffuse. It's very fluid. People kind of meet everybody else. So if you do a social network analysis, that doesn't really capture this very fluid quality of the people together. And it has very porous boundaries. People are in and out. It's not, they don't really have rituals anymore. I call it a social blob to capture this fluidity. It's multicephalic. It has many heads. It has within it definitely organized organization, but there's a tremendous internal rivalry within it. Whether it's Hizb ut-Tahrir, Al-Muhajirun, the Muslim Brotherhood, some of the Salafi organization, all of these, there's no real central command, but they sometimes coalesce together in large demonstration, especially political demonstration. It's a discursive community of meaning, anchored by symbols and rituals. The symbols are their dress, big beard, flowing beard, specific dress code and appearance, rituals about specific food, and it's not just halal, it's being halal to an extreme extent, by asking, is there, anybody manipulate this and so on. It's very interesting. And specific ways of praying. They don't pray like other Muslims. They actually pray a little bit differently. In an offshoot of the Salafi way of praying. And the rituals also are, the ritualistic expressions and reference that they use all the time, and often to specific authors. This is an ideology of rebellion, and it's rebellion both against a host culture, the West, and I'm looking at the West, so in a sense what I'm saying may not pertain to Pakistan, South Asia, and so on, because what I've studied is the West, and in the field you have to be very clear about the limitation of what you're looking at, and you can't just overgeneralize. But in the West, it's really very much a rebellion against both the host tradition and the home tradition. The message, namely the West is at war against Islam, does resonate with some of their personal grievances. That being said, there's a lot of local variation in France, England, the United States, even various parts of the United States, due to local historical heritage. And there's a continuum of activism here. So the reaction of the native, non-Muslim native, is absolutely critical to this counterculture. Especially in the labor market, if there's discrimination, we find that mostly in Europe. Here less so, because of what the Muslim community is here and where it came from. Political and local activities are extremely of the non-Muslim Western nativists is really critical, namely what you hear on Fox News. People really get very upset about what's going on Fox News. It's an insult, and it is an insult. It's meant to be an insult. So in a sense, that has the notion for young people that the West is at war against Islam does resonate with what they hear on the news and the discrimination. So this is on the cognitive side. This is the ideological utopian counterculture, but what distinguishes this from others is that it's politically active. You have very strong political activism, namely in demonstration against things that they think is unjust, and indeed sometimes it is, and in internet forums. There's a lot of political activism. This has migrated to the internet in a sense. This counterculture, this discursive community is created through the intense effort of a few political entrepreneurs. And the way it's distributed worldwide is where those entrepreneurs randomly arise, in a sense. And there's a continuum